Thorns. Such a simple concept in nature. The enemy attacks you, and you deal damage to them. But within its simplicity, there are so many diverse ways, or paths, or options that you can take to customize your particular Thorns build, that this is truly one of those more diverse builds, archetypes that exist within the game. The path that I chose for my particular Thorns build started out as bleeding, but I have since transitioned it into a combination of bleed and poison, because I think that makes the most sense for damaging ailments and how to make the most advantage of our Thorns damage. Hey guys, my name is Civic Dude, and stick around, we're going to show you some of the build updates that we've made to the Thorns build and where I think you can take this in the future. So like I said, Thorns is such a diverse build archetype that you can really make this into any kind of Thorns build that you want. You can do lightning Thorns, fire damage, ignite based Thorns, pure physical damage based Thorns. You could probably even do some cold damage based Thorns with some of the items that exist to convert damage into different types within the game. The route that I chose here is bleed and poison. It's taking advantage of the fact that we deal big Thorns damage, and the bigger single hit damage that we do, the bigger bleeds and the bigger poisons that we proc on the enemies. Makes for really good clear during the maps and pretty good bossing damage as well. Now, this character right here, I have taken to level 80, and we've done so far T10, T11 maps, and that's not because of a limitation of the build, that's just because I haven't been progressing maps as fast as I normally do. Where I could see this easily going is way past level 90, definitely into T15s and even pinnacle bosses. How it stands up against T4 Zesht, T4 Arbiter of Ash remains to be seen, but it could easily take on the content at that upper level of in-game content if you put the right investment into it. Myself, I again have taken it to level 80, and we'll go through the gearing updates, the passive tree changes that we've made, and the various things that we've updated along the way as we've self-discovered what this build can become when you apply yourself to bleed and poison. Back in the game now, you can see here that we are at level 80. We have definitely come a long way since the previous video. There's a long way that we could still go, of course, but we have so far capped all of our block. We've capped most of our resistances. We are pretty light on armor, honestly, but I think that's just a gearing optimization that, I could still make with the character. But our Thorns damage is pretty solid. We're up to 2600 on the top end, almost 1400 on the bottom end, with 77.5 crit chance on the sheet here. However, that does not actually consider the additional 30% chance that we get against bleeding enemies. So that 77 is probably closer to 85 if we're being truly honest with ourselves. Now, since the last video, somebody actually commented on that last video. I think his name is Elzund, I think is how you pronounce it. So apologies if I got that wrong. But he actually suggested, or they actually suggested, that I consider poison in addition to bleed because it plays so nicely together. Specifically things like, let's see if I can find it. Specifically things like Envenom, as well as Bursting Plague. These two are really good for clear speed. Not only do they help poison enemies, but they then take advantage of that poison by spreading it to others and causing damage when poisoned enemies die. So great suggestion there. I really appreciate it. It definitely helped kick me over to this bleed poison combination for the build, and I think that was a lot of fun. And so really good combination there. It actually helped also point me into an additional Herald that we could use, so Herald of Plague, just to help spread poisons around even further. And in addition to that, it helped give me another Herald or another aura persistent buff that I could apply things like Vitality and Cannibalism to, because I was running out of sockets on the other ones, Herald of Blood and Scavenge Plating, because I didn't have the perfect jewelers, and so I needed additional sockets for these other things here. So that actually worked out really well. So thank you for that suggestion. I really appreciate it. As far as the gearing, so we've been consistently making upgrades throughout the build, additional better spears. We were trying that one spear over here called Scytha's Spear when we were doing pure bleed, and we're using this to get more bleeds and aggravating those bleedings. Now, the thing that I don't like about this spear is it has really low fizz damage, and the way that I understand bleeding and poison to work is the magnitude of the bleeding and the poison is based on the size of the hit that you perform, and if your weapon is this low, it's not going to be very big damage, very big bleeds, or very big poisons. So I transitioned over to a fizz damage spear with as high a damage as I could find within reasonable budget, and that seemed to definitely help with bigger bleeds and bigger poisons. Another optimization that we made was adding in the Adziri's Acuity gloves. These make life leech from, or any leech actually, from critical hits instantaneous, and so doing that allows us to drop these leech nodes that we had up here, as well as these leech nodes that we had here. And if we had gone down and picked these up, these leech nodes down here. So a really good passive tree optimization by picking up those gloves. Picking it back up with the gear, like I said, we've been incrementally improving our armor and accessories as much as possible. So for instance, the chest piece here, just a really good armor evasion piece with really high thorns damage and some resistances. Really good shield over here with good armor, good life, preferred high fizz thorns damage if we could, and then of course resistances and or max res where we could get it. One thing that you'll notice across most of these pieces of gear is that I've started adding in the greater tithings, greater runes of tithing, because they got a buff, and so no longer are they 1 to 10 lightning thorns damage. They are now 1 to 100 lightning thorns damage, and so that's really huge. It's free damage for this build, and so because most of this gear, well, with the exception of the chest piece here, most of this gear doesn't need the sockets for resistances. We're using the sockets for these tithing runes, which just helps with damage. Going further, some things that you could do here would be to take, for example, the boots and the helmet and either corrupt them for double sockets, or in the case of the boots, corrupt them for an increased roll to the flat crit hit chance. So I think you can get up to 31, somewhere around 31 flat critical hit chance on Thorns. So that would be the in-game goal for the boots, in my opinion. I think it's better to get that than just the 2 sockets for the double tithings. So that would be a goal that you'd want to shoot for if you're taking this into end game. But moving on now to the passive tree, you'll notice that we've definitely made some changes since the last time. In my POB and in the max roll guides, I definitely included leveling trees that you start out up here and you beeline for the crit nodes over here, and then eventually you come down here separately, and then once you can connect them up here, you actually trim off these original starting nodes. So I've done that here in this tree for sure. And now that we've transitioned into bleed plus poison, we've also dropped the extra bleed nodes that we had over here for magnitude and chance to inflict bleeding, because we already have a bunch of chance to inflict bleeding, and so I wanted to pick up the automatic aggravated bleeding notable over here. And so Crimson Assault is what we picked up. It allowed us to pick up one node and drop something like 6 or 7 different nodes, which is just another passive tree optimization that I would recommend, because it allowed us to easily pick up Fast Acting Toxins and Wasting, which just double dip into both applying to thorns as well as, applying to bleeds as well as poison damage. So really good there, and we were already right here on the tree because we picked up perfectly placed knife. So it made perfect sense to me to try and get these 2 nodes as well, if at all possible. On the left here, we've also picked up this cluster right here called Lasting Trauma, which again is just another group of nodes that applied not only to bleeding but also to poison. And so it made good sense to me to pick up both of these because they apply to both. And so that's one thing that you can definitely try and do is pick up really good value nodes that apply to more than just one type of damage if possible. This is one of those examples. Where you would want to go from here would be to pick up all of these max res nodes as you go into retaliation to pick up the extra thorns damage if you blocked recently. The idea here is that you pick up all of the max res nodes, you pick up this jewel, and then you can drop this node, this node, this node, and this node, and instead path through these two area nodes right here, because it's a much more efficient tree pathing than what we're doing right now. Assuming you, of course, have the dexterity and strength and whatever other attributes that you need to cover your gear and gems. Speaking of gems, let's go ahead and take a look at those now, because those have been updated for sure since the last time that you saw this video, or the previous video, I should say. So we're still using Rapid Assault because it is simply the fastest way to apply the Thorns damage, using Quill Burst and Barbs, the two new support gems released in 0.2. I'm also using Heft here for just larger hits, again, because the size of the bleed and the size of the poison is based on the size of the hit that you deal. And so because the final hit of Rapid Assault deals a pretty sizable strike, I wanted to make that bigger with Heft, and so hopefully then provide bigger bleeds and bigger poison. And then of course we support this with Martial Tempo, just for additional attack speed. Disengage is something that we use quite often actually, because it is not only really good for mobility, but it's just also good to get away from enemies. And because we use it so often, I use it actually as a very good utility skill to apply certain things, such as blind, impale, and maim. So this is probably a flex spot. You can substitute whatever utility supports that you'd like to for your setup, but this is what I use it for, and it seems to work out pretty good. Spear Field is our main clearing skill, so we go through the map and do a bunch of these spear fields, and we support that with Incision, which just makes things more likely to be bleeding. And not only that, but it also causes those bleeds to have higher magnitude per incision stack upon the enemy. We also do Armor Explosion. So being a Warbringer, all of our damage, all damage types that we have contribute to armor break. And so Spearfield constantly breaks enemies' armor. And so because of that, we use Armor Explosion to help with clear and just cause those bigger screen-wide clears. Additionally, we're using Envenom over here to proc poison on our enemies, and so this causes more enemies to be poisoned based on that spear field application. And then lastly, we're doing deep cuts here to just give bigger bleeds on the spear fields, because this is the primary way that we actually apply our bleeds, is through these spear field hits. And so you'll constantly run around the map causing things to bleed, which then will cause a chain reaction of explosions that we'll look at with other gems here in just a second. Next up, I have Blood Hunt. So Blood Hunt is really good for another utility skill for me, actually. It's supposed to be used for big damage on enemies that have been bled a lot. However, I like to use it more specifically to break armor. So over here, Exploit Weakness. So one of the downsides of this build is that when you're bossing, you're not constantly breaking armor. You know, you only have one enemy, and it can only have its armor broken once. And so that's the primary way that we pick up our scavenged plating stacks, is by breaking enemy armor. And so if you are not breaking armor, then you don't have as much thorns damage. So what we will use Blood Hunt for is to break or consume fully broken armor, so that we can then reapply the armor break and then regather scavenged plating stacks, so that we keep our thorns damage up as much as possible. I'm also testing out Culmination. I'm not exactly sure how much this actually contributes. This was sort of a flex spot for me when I was testing things out, so take this one for a grain of salt. It may not actually be good for this build, but I was using it to test around. All right, Herald of Blood we use to help with not only aggravating bleeding, but also chain explosions across the map. So clear speed is definitely something good here, supported by things like Hemocrystals, a new support gem, Magnified Effect to just make a bigger AoE, as well as Bursting Plague, which is that thing that I showed you earlier, which helps take advantage of poisoned enemies and causing them to explode or damage when they die. And then here for Brutality, again, bleeding and poison are physical damage based damage types, and so Brutality here made sense to me to try and inflict bigger damage on these exploding enemies, so we just get better screen-wide clear overall. Scavenged Plating is the main player in our damage equation, because it gives you flat thorns damage per scavenged plating stack. And so I think that you can have 10 stacks total, at least by default. And so, you know, at level 17, where we are now, that would be 470 to 710 flat thorns damage when fully stacked. And that is pretty huge whenever you talk about scaling up the damage and applying that to enemies. One thing that I really like too is persistence, because it just makes those plating stacks last longer, which again goes to help things like bossing when you don't have a lot of adds to continually re-break the armor. This is definitely something good to have. Thornskin is another support that was added. It makes a lot of sense to include here because it just gives you increased thorns damage, and so really good add right there. And then physical mastery, not to be understated here, gives an additional level to scavenged plating, which just makes the flat number of thorns damage one level higher. The end goal here would be to add a unique jewel right here called Prism of Belief that could give you up to +3 additional levels to scavenged plating. We don't have that yet, but that would be something that you would want to add right here, in my opinion. Last couple of skills here. Bloodhound's Mark is good for just helping ensure that enemies take blood loss. Sometimes it helps you inflict a heavy stun on enemies, so it's occasionally good. I usually just proc this on a boss at the beginning of the fight, and then once they get stunned, I'll reapply it and then keep going from there. Thunder Sleep I have purely as a terrain crossing skill, so it's not super useful except for sometimes when I want to jump over a ledge. And then Herald of Plague is good, not so much because of what it does, but because it gives me additional places to socket in things like cannibalism and vitality. And since I was moving over to a poison and bleed combination, it seemed like it made a lot of sense, so I wanted to try it out, and it seems to have been good. So I would definitely recommend it if you have the extra spirit to spend, because it definitely is great whenever you can socket in vitality and cannibalism. Both of those are really good for survivability. And that's really it. That's the bulk of the updates that we've made so far. Like I said, I am only level 80, so there are definitely, you know, loads more you could do to this build. For example, we could get the rest of our ascendancy points. The next one, of course, would be Turtle Charm, which is huge for defense and just proccing that thorns damage all the time. The other one that I would consider probably over imploding impacts would actually be Jade Heritage, because it gives you additional fizz damage reduction. So right here, the Jade stacks, each one gives 1% PDR, and so you can get up to 10 of those, and so that would be really good for defense. I don't think the actual encase in Jade is something that I would be using much, but the additional PDR would be really good for this build for sure. And then from there, on the path of building, I'm actually going to include, I've also included a level 92, I think it is, skill tree that kind of shows you the paths and such for picking up all these max res nodes, and then what you would want to do at that level. So that's it. This is probably gonna be the last video that I make on Thorns. I'm actually leveling up a different character now. I wanted to try as many builds as possible this league, just because I feel like we're in a point in the game where min-maxing each specific build to me isn't as fun as trying out all the different builds, because there's just so many options these days on a brand new game. Whereas in Path of Exile 1, most of the meta builds are kind of known, and it's really a game of trying to min-max those meta builds as much as possible. Here in Path of Exile 2, I feel like it's the opposite, where we're trying to discover new builds and then just play as many of those as possible. So look forward to the next build coming out soon. It is actually going to be another warrior build, but this one's going to be a Titan, and we're going to take advantage of a lot of the AoE nodes and the fact that you can get 50% increased of the small passives. So it should be fun. I'm going to be leveling it this weekend, and then hopefully putting out another video, or a first video for that one, in the upcoming week, next week. But in the meantime, guys, again, my name is Civic Dude. I hope you guys have a great holiday weekend if you celebrate Easter. If not, maybe you got a couple days off of work or school or something, and so that would be great too. In the meantime, like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. I really hope that you guys have played this kind of build before, because it was a really fun build for me to play. Definitely a fun archetype. And I think that it could have a really great future in Path of Exile 2. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.